Hello, folks. We're back with Vonn and Darren. My name's Shay with the Ascension TV, and we're following up with the part 2. A couple of weeks ago, we had a great conversation around humanitarian projects, and today we're going to follow through with the what we said we would do at the end of that conversation, which was to expand and go further down the pathway of looking at regenerative leadership and how we can bring that to not just humanitarian projects, but to our communities and to our lives in general. So it's going to be a really exciting conversation because we're going to unpack this with Yvonne and Darren on a deeper level, who have some great experience, some great life experience to share. So I'm really excited. And maybe we could start with, I've got a question, and it might seem like an obvious one, and we do often talk about this in our conversations, but why would it even be relevant to go down the path of regenerative leadership? Why is that even necessary right now?
What a great question. I love that. Well, hello and hi, Darren. Lovely to see you again. Well, the first thing that instantly came to me as you said that is because everything that we have been partaking in and that we've been experiencing for certainly for as long as I've been alive has been degenerative. Is that a word? But that's the word that came through. So in other words, we are now in a product or an end product of what occurs both on a humanitarian, but in a human way, but in the land, the earth, in every possible thing that we can address, there has been degeneration. There has not been regeneration. There has been a lessening of what I feel like sucking energy out of without replenishing. So that is really how I have watched the world become less vibrant. I've watched humanity become less vibrant. So if we don't start to change that and start regenerating ourselves, regenerating the soil, regenerating, the air, just regenerating our minds, then this species will go extinct. And I know that is not that's not the intention for our creation. So it's absolutely essential subject right now. So what do you think about that, Darren? Well, Darren, obviously my question was so challenging that Darren felt he's having some internet issues, but we'll get to that. So does that kind of answer your question, Shay, as to
Yeah,
why you asked it?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Yvonne. And I'm sure we'll get Darren back in a moment. But I remember in 2019, and I was at Woodford Folk Festival down here in the southeast Queensland, and we had a wonderful guest speaker, which was Dr. Bruce Lipton, come across from the United States to Australia, and he opened his presentation by highlighting the current state of our world in terms of biodiversity. And the big highlight that he had pulled a bit of research from Europe and also in North America, measuring the number of bees that were inhabiting across farmlands and across native bushlands, and they had in the last 30 years recorded significant loss in bee life, which is obviously speaking to what you had just mentioned around the degeneration path that we have been on. But as you said, we're in this period where we're in the midst of a massive shift, I believe, to move towards what would be the inversion of degeneration and the epitome of regeneration. And to go down that path further, exploring what that really entails, because you had mentioned there broadly, regenerating our minds, regenerating the earth, regenerating, our communities and the way that we live our lives. And it's at a first glance, it seems like a huge task to undertake because there's so much that needs to change. And I guess my curiosity lies in, coming into that awareness that there is, a lot, there is this pathway that we have been down that has been degenerating our quality of our life, as well as the quality of our food and the quality of our environment and the air. How, like, where does one even begin? I would love to explore. And it looks like we got Darren back in the studio, so we'll include him into this conversation. But yeah, I'm just curious, particularly when it can seem overwhelming at times with the amount of degenerative kind of capitulation that we've experienced. And what, like, where do we begin? How do we start? I know, Vonn, you've been heavily focused on the self journey and regenerating ourselves, and then bringing that to community. But I'd be curious to hear more on your perspective on the first steps, and then how do we evolve that way of living into our to really embody it and ingrain it into our everyday lifestyle.
There's a phrase that I like to use is, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So the fact that we have to change is obvious. The first step is to own the fact that this is what we've created so far. And it's up to us to make that change. So we have to own it. And we have to recognize that whatever we were doing before is not going to work anymore. And we have to be prepared to let go of it. And that's a huge step, to let go of the egoic way that we have lived, which is really a survival mechanism. And to realize that actually that so-called survival mechanism is actually now doing the very opposite. And then also we have to let go of this better than, I'm better than you, I know more than you, I am, this. We also have to let go of this, the only reason for doing anything is to get a profit, a monetary profit. So there's a lot of letting go, as far as I can see, that has to begin. And that goes within ourselves, and we have to do this inner work, of course, and to recognize that that is all programmed conditioning, so that we become enslaved and do things for others. But in that methodology, we have destroyed so much. So the first step, again, for me, is to bring people back to the simplicity of life. And in the communities, yes, I'm very focused on creating communities, because within that community, for instance, I had someone the other day say to me, well, you know what, I've got, because we're actually talking about one of our, previous lives, our videos with, the ripe time. And this lady said, you know what, I've got 10 acres. I would love to create food foresting on it, but I don't know what to do. And I went, oh, thanks very much. Well, I do. I've got a few people that I can talk to, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And that's what's occurring within these communities, that this, regeneration, because we're seeing it. So it's the ownership that it's broken, and then the willingness to do whatever it takes to recreate something better. And that is within ourselves, and that is within our environment. And you talked about the bees before, saying, and Bruce Lipton, I have met him several times and spent a lot of time in his lectures as he continuously comes back and forth to Australia, and very fortunately always comes to Melbourne. and he that to me, salt of the earth, somebody who's owned that whatever he was taught didn't seem to sit with him, and he regenerated himself. And that is just such a beautiful example. I know that I have certainly regenerated myself. um, and that is this willingness to give up that ego attachment, and then to work together in harmony. So Darren, you're back. How exciting. So how does all this sit with you, and this need for regeneration right now? I'd love to have your response to that.
Thanks, Vonn, and thanks, Shay, as well. The internet's sort of popping in a little bit in and out today. I think we're in a place where right now in life, I see it a lot, and having come from a country and sporting background, there's a lot of force being put on things. There's a lot of competition is really promoted. It's dog eat dog out there for number one. And I don't think for us moving forward, I don't see that being the way forward. Seeing it back to, I think you commented on ego, and a lot of that is based around ego. So for myself, having come from a sporting background, I can see why and how that's promoted very heavily in society, because we want to get everyone competing against everyone else, so that we're internally fighting and making it difficult for everyone. But a wise mentor once said to me, if everyone's going in one direction, we need to turn around and run the other way, because that's probably the right way. So over the years, as I've sort of taken that journey inside personally, and you being one of my mentors, Yvonne, as we've discussed a lot of things over the years, force is not necessarily the right way forward. And I think there's a really big natural law that is available for everyone, but we seem to go the forceful route regularly. And the natural law to give first, and there's a cycle of giving and receiving, and everyone's out there for themselves. They're actually and not giving to other one. You're breaking a cycle for somebody else. So in order to receive, you actually have to give first, and give first, it opens up the channels to be able to receive. And I see a lot of people breaking the cycle both ends. They're happy to give, but they find it difficult to receive. And in doing that, breaking that cycle to receive, you're actually stopping somebody else's cycle. So I think if we can get back into that giving and receiving cycle, not necessarily wanting to give and receive from the same person, because you might give something to somebody and receive it somewhere else. So I see the cycle as not necessarily linear. And I think if we can get back into that natural law cycle of giving and receiving, and not coming from force, but coming more from the space of love than fear, because I see that whole cycle of force is all around fear. Having been through that cycle personally, it's quite difficult for somebody who's in that force, in that fear, to be able to break it. But again, like the mentor said, if everyone's running in fear the other way, running in the space of love is probably the right direction to go. So, and I think half the battle is letting that ego down, like you said, Yvonne. And survival does interesting things to different people. I still see it, and I was just at a place a little while ago before I come and jumped on this call, and the whole motto. There's a really great book. Can I mention a book? Is that okay? If I mention a book here, Yvonne, there's a really awesome book called The Go-Giver, and if you haven't read it, it's written by a guy called Bob Berg and John David Mann. I highly recommend go and have a read of that, and if you can take on that philosophy, the world will be a different place. So I'll throw that back to the circle.
Thank you. Well, whenever anybody mentions a book, I'm into it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book.
Okay. So Shay, I know that you are very involved with regeneration of the soil and land, and going, we're moving from monoculture to polyculture, and of course, for you, how do you see, because you're a different generation to me, obviously, and how do you see this playing out in your life now? This because there is obviously a shift, isn't there? We all can feel it. And there's something that I just wanted to mention is because you talked about it seeming to be such a giant task. But for me, I don't actually see that, because what I notice is there are so many pockets all over the globe of people like us who are not talking about it, but they're actually activating it. And so these are spreading and expanding. And what I also know to be true is that as the energy is shifting on the planet, that is igniting a code that is within our DNA. And people just wake up and suddenly go, you know what? I'm going to dig over my garden and I'm going to plant food. And yesterday they might have, never thought about that, because this is what's happening with so many people. They wake up one morning and say, well, whatever I was yesterday, I'm no longer that. And that's speeding up. So I'd like to hear from you how you see that in your generation, how that driving force now is getting people to look deeper both within themselves and how they're operating. And they're not so driven to get a job and make money as the ultimate goal, which is what we were all programmed with.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne, and Darren for sharing as well. There's some great bits of gold in that, and to be really open and honest, the last couple of days with the full moon energy, I've had a lot of emotional feelings come up for me that I've had to really internalize and sit with, and sit in circle and share and be open around. And I was kind of feeling a little bit lost, and kind of like, where should I put my energy and put my focus? And this morning when I woke up, instantly I was like, oh, I just want to be in the garden. And it was really cool because I've been kind of focusing on building really healthy soil over the last few months in the garden. And we're coming into winter season here on the sunny coast, and it's kind of like the last opportunity to get a few of the brassicas in the ground. But I just want to share this little video, because as I was in the garden, the compost area, I don't know if you can quite see it, but it was just absolutely teeming with worms. I don't know if that's in focus very well or not, but I mean, the relevance of me sharing this, it was just absolutely full of worms.
That's alive. That's how it should be.
Absolutely alive.
That's amazing.
And I was like so excited by this. It just shifted my whole day, and gave me lots of energy. And I was really just really inspired. And I mean, ultimately, when that picture of the worms, there was so many in such a small spot. But what you were both speaking to earlier around, coming together and working as a community, like, it's very rare that you see one worm off on its own doing its thing. It's working together as a community to regenerate the soil just by doing its thing, by passing its castings and aerating the soil and bringing that nutritional value to the earth. And oftentimes, what I notice in my own life is I can get caught up in my own processes, my own thinking, and caught up in my own story, and without actually just allowing myself to be in the moment and feel the inner calling that is always there, which is just to go and potter around in the garden and have some fun and interact with the other life that's alive and moving. And it's quite amazing, the sense of fulfillment and meaning in such a simple activity, that it's like, if anyone has grown their own food out there, and then you get the cucumber, 4 months later, whatever it is, and then you're eating it, it's like the most fulfilling meal ever, because it's like there's a real relationship to the process of the evolution and the growth and the harvest of that the yield of that energy. That's, as Darren had said, it's you don't just get a cucumber from a seed. There's this whole process of giving. You got to give to the soil. You got to give time and nurture and the right environment and the right setting for the cucumber to actually be able to be received back. So it really ties into what Darren had said, and it's like this whole timeline where it's all about giving, and then the receivership actually generally comes in abundance, like a fruit tree, for example. Like, it will last for hundreds of years and give fruit if given the right circumstances for such a long period of time. And so that concept that Darren highlighted, I think, is so valuable and so important to remember and to take into our everyday lives, and to really remember on a daily basis these simple inner callings that is like ultimately guiding us. And I would love to hear more from Darren as well around his perspective on listening to that inner call and how that can really guide us in our lives moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Shay. I think getting back to earth is really important. It's grounding ourselves as well. Like this morning, you were saying you've gone out in the garden and really got some earthing and got some perspective of what's really important. I think these little things here sort of get in our way sometimes. There's so many callings out there, but what's really the most important thing? And that is back to community. I have to remind myself too, because you get busy in life. And it's, what really is important, and that is building those local communities. And the local community might necessarily be right in your town. It might be you're in a region and you've got friendships and that in those regions, and you're able to build up those relationships and be able to help like a region, if it's not necessarily just your local community, because you don't know so many people. But it's getting back to the basics that we grew up on. I remember growing up in small communities when I was young, and it was just so invaluable to have those tight-knit communities, and everyone looked so focused down now on walking around like this. They don't even realize what's going on around them. And these things are great for certain things, but certainly don't bring communication and leadership and being able to connect people together. They have their use in society, and I'm grateful for that. But I think back to that face-to-face, community-related things where you're talking and interacting in 3D instead of the screen that's in front of us, makes a big difference in our life. And being able to get back to those basic things, getting back to earth, sun, air, all the elements, I think are really important. So it's a good reminder. Thanks, Shay, for your morning, that I need to get out there and get a bit of grounding this afternoon in the sun where it's nice and warm.
So stop bragging about it nice and warm, okay? It's been raining for 3 weeks in Melbourne, and it's freezing.
We sent it down your way, I think.
However, yeah, but you see, then we have beautiful spring. So, but
Yes.
I think the plant kingdom is actually calling us, because I am an indoor plant lover. And so my plants this morning were calling me, and I go around and fondle them, as people say, and spray them and talk to them and thank them, and then have a look at what they're bringing. My orchids are starting to throw out spikes, and then I get so excited, and it is that, because it's renewal. We're talking about regeneration, and it's renewal. So what I would like to share, and that I'm seeing, because we're talking about how are we going to do it differently, right? How are we going to take out this corporate methodology of business. How are we going to create without that? Without there being one person who calls the shots and everybody else just scurries about. So what is regenerative leadership? Well, for me, I'm seeing that actually operating in the Connect to Soul New Earth community. And I was discussing it this morning with Beata, one of my stars in the community. And we're just talking about this, that we are creating things all the time. And yes, I might be the hub of the wheel, but I'm doing absolutely zilch. Well, they wouldn't agree with that because, I send out the energy and I hold the space and I love them and I all of that. But the actual doing part. So for me, my intention has always been to be a way shower, not to lead the way, but to bring the best out of people so that they can lead their own way. And that is what I see. I see people that are just expanding and they're finding their authentic self and they run with it and they become, much more than I can ever be. And that is regenerative leadership. It is bringing the best out of every person that you work with. So that if you have people who are coming to work with you, not for you, and you put all your energy in finding the best in them, then they will be the best for the whole organization. But if you're just in it for your, what you can get out of it, then you're sucking the life out of your own organization. And that is what degeneration is, and that's what's been happening in our world. So we've sucked the life out of the earth, the soil. We just keep digging and expecting it to give more and more and more without replenishing and without even gratitude so often. It's for me, the word thank you are the gateway to heaven. Every second in my life is a thank you, and just things just come to me that I need. I don't ever have more, I don't have a great deal more than I need. Although if you look around my house, you'd say, well, what's one little woman doing with all this stuff? But you know what I mean? It's not, my life isn't about having a huge bank account and having a huge mansion and and being the best. And that used to be, I used to think, my goodness, I've got to, be the best speaker and the best this and that. And, but that isn't my innate. My innate is most happy doing what I'm doing here with you guys, or being in a community where as you said, Darren, where I can touch people, not just touch them from speaking to them and with them, but actually, hug them and hold them and exchange energies of the heart. And that is what's occurring in the small New Earth communities, that the one that might be the hub of the wheel, as I call it, that energy is only there for one reason, and that is to bring the best out of all the others so that regenerates itself. And that is what's happening with the way that we're doing, with permaculture, when we're doing food foresting, when we're doing all of this is now pointing towards, because if you look at nature, you talked about the worms, but the bees can't make honey on their own. Look at ants. I mean, goodness gracious me, they come in hordes. They're not, if they were one on their own, they wouldn't last 5 seconds. So, nature shows us all the time that it is in communities that we can expand, that we can keep creating life. And I think that is what this whole shift is about. We have forgotten the gift of life and how that is a precious, precious gift that we need to look after, that we need to nurture and nourish and share and give. We need to give life to ourselves, to our environment, to our families. But when you look and see what's been happening, particularly over the last 50 years, it's been the opposite. We've been sucking life out of everything. And I am just so excited to still be here to watch the shift in consciousness where people are recognizing that this is occurring. And so this regenerative leadership has to be in everything we do.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's at the stage now where it's like it must be in everything.
Well, that's right.
So yeah, I really like that perspective, Yvonne. What do you think, Darren?
I think we have so much knowledge available inside of communities at the moment. And I think half the battle has been the separation that's been created between everyone. I think we need to get back to old school, that communities are built around people, they're built around communication skills, and they're built around selfless leadership. And I think that's where I see in Yvonne, she's built an amazing community that's been built around love, it's been built around service, and it's been built around mentoring the community to get the best out of people. I think the old style of leadership has all been leadership by title. You know, you step into an organization or a group and you go, you'll do it my way, or there's the highway. And I think the new model is really around service and being of service to communities and leading the way by your actions, not necessarily leading your way by your voice. Because actions speak so much louder than words. By what you do and how you act speaks so much louder than what you're saying. So I think that's what I see what I've learned from Yvonne over the years in building people. You need to be able to then give back and mentor and teach. And I think we need to get back to those old ways, because they used to do that 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And now it's like separation, and everyone's anyone that's gone and done a course is now a master at it. I think it takes time to get really good at something. And then we need to allow those people who have that skill to be able to share back to the community. I guess it's like the old hero's journey. You come back and you share with your community what you've learned after the experience and the journey that you've been on. We think we need more of that. Get back to those basics and bring that togetherness instead of that separation. And that comes from allowing those who have lots of knowledge to be able to share that. And then how do they pass that back to the community so that we can learn and regenerate, so to speak, instead of just take. We can regenerate and share it so that knowledge and wisdom can be passed on to the next generation. Otherwise, we've got generations who have amazing knowledge that are going to pass by, and that information and knowledge and skill is not going to be passed on, and that would be really sad. So I think we have lots of possibility right now to do that and do it in a different way. And I think mentoring is really important. Shay?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and have also admired Yvonne's grace as she walks this earth. That's certain. And as you mentioned, that it's funny, like looking at different cultures around the world and having the privilege to go to Japan and witness the way that it's so culturally embedded that they have such a respect for their elders, and it's just deeply ingrained in their culture. For example, they always let their eldest people walk through a doorway first. They have the right of way, so to speak, like they're showing the way, and it's like all these little implications that have a big impact in the way that they see their elderly, and they really take care of them, which is so vital, I feel, and as you had mentioned, Darren, a little bit lost in our Western culture, which is it's sad in a sense. There's a great series on Netflix just come out recently where they did a study in Australia, and I think it's called like grandparent childcare or something like this. And basically what they did was they took the measurements of these older generation who are in a home, but they were somewhat, depressed and isolated and felt separated from their community. And so what they did with this experiment was they brought these younglings, kindergarten kids, into their home and their community, and wow, the shift that they had over the 6 to 7 weeks of that filming this journey, and the energy, of connecting the young and the old, and not only did the elderly benefit, but also the younglings benefited tremendously in their communication and their relation, and and then learning from these kind of diversity of age bracket. And there was a symbiotic reciprocal exchange of giving and receiving, where they both benefited, because the older generation benefited from all the energy that these young kids brought, and the chaoticness actually got them up and moving, and they were more physical and they had more energy in their day. And so, I mean, like you said, Darren, the separation that we've kind of been going on in this path towards degeneration, it has shifted to this more inclusive, connected, communal way of living in our everyday lives. And sometimes it seems like so blatantly obvious and simple, and right smack in front of our face, and it's like in our everyday environment, but somehow we've kind of been just daydreaming and whisked off on a pathway that hasn't ultimately allowed us to do what's natural. Like, it would seem natural that grandparents spend time with their grandchildren, right? But it doesn't often happen for whatever reason. Every circumstance is going to be different, of course, but it's just funny to observe how far off track sometimes we can easily go. And the example again is my own experience, where I was in my own head and a lot of energy going on with the full moon, but then just bringing it back to going outside and going into the earth, and the massive significant impact that can have on my daily well-being. And and so simple the solution, and same too, like the connection of the young children and the elderly is like, seems so simple that it can have such a positive impact, but so simple solution just to connect the different age brackets. So it's beautiful to witness that more of this is coming into our awareness, and when I say more of this, I mean more of these simple solutions, because I definitely get the sense that we have seemingly complex challenges. However, we often overlook and forget how simple they can, we can really find the answers to the biggest problems that we have, and start practicing them on a daily basis. And that's something that I've witnessed Yvonne do with consistency and diligence in that regenerative leadership way, as a way shower and a pioneer in many respects, that it's often not that difficult. However, it's one of the most resistant, or I would say it's something that we're most afraid of, but something that we most crave at the same time. And that is that deeper sense of intimacy, like intimacy in our relationships and the intimacy with ourselves. That and the example again was when I was having this over the last couple of days, like this emotional turmoil, inner turmoil. I wanted to avoid it, but reality is the what really helped me to resolve it was to sit with it and be with it. And so my camera's gone out, and I'll work on that. I'll pass it over to Yvonne.
We've lost you. You've become a full circle.
It's the full moon, Vonn. It's the full moon.
You just mentioned a full moon, Shay, and there you were. I just wanted to look all of what you say, and it's lovely that you put so much on me, but I know that none of it could happen within you unless you were prepared to do the work for yourself. But what I would like to discuss here with you, Darren, and with Shay when he returns is that the title of this was Humanitarian Projects, and I would just like, before we finish today, to look at what you think are the most important humanitarian projects, because when most people, when they think about humanitarian projects, they it's like Mount Everest. It's like, well, we have to stop, and we have to feed the starving people. We have to build houses for the homeless. We have to, these are huge, huge projects that, yes, and they do need to occur. Well, what I see as one of the most important humanitarian projects is what we've been talking about today. And that is right here on the ground. Because if we look at something and it becomes too big, then we don't start because it's overwhelming. But what is the humanitarian project that you can activate this moment? And that starts with yourself. Because how are you treating you? Are you loving you? Are you nurturing you? Are you nourishing you? Are you listening to your needs? And I'm not talking about the needs up here that wants to go and get yourself yet another updated phone or whatever other rubbish that's out there. Look, I love my phone because it does I love it. It's a wonderful tool of communication. But as long as it works, I don't need to have whatever they're offering me at the moment. I think I've got a Samsung S8 and they're offering me an S22. Well, I don't need that. I'm doing fine with what I've got, right? It's that we need, nothing's ever good enough. We have to have the latest and the best. Well, be the best of you. That to me is the greatest humanitarian project that everyone can start this moment. Right now, this moment. To be the best of you, because that radiates an energy that affects the world. And that took me a long time to find. I've been at this for a long time, and it's been my focused intention always that there's more of me to find, and it's got to be based on love. And if it isn't based on love, then it isn't going to nurture anything, and it's not going to enliven anything. So the first humanitarian project for me is always me. The next humanitarian project then is how can I instill that in you so that you can then bring that to the forth and then you can pay that forward. And as we then go about doing that, then automatically we are called to the bigger projects because we will not need to be taking care of ourselves. We won't be degenerated within ourselves. And when we have a regenerative energy coming out of ourselves, we are available to so much more. Wow, that was pretty good, wasn't it?
That was awesome, Vonn. Yeah.
I love when these things come through.
Yeah. That was cool.
So what do you see as these, that's something we've had so much talk about, these humanitarian projects. So that's mine.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there, Yvonne. I was listening to a book by a guy called David Goggins and the book's called You Can't Hurt Me. But he asked about halfway through the book, he asked a really interesting question, which is right in line with what you just said. And that the question was, what are we really capable of as human beings? What are we really capable of internally? And half the battle, what's going on between your ears as you're sort of leading towards there, Yvonne. And I think we probably handle about 40% of what we're really capable of as a human being, both in love and spirit and everything else. And I think a lot of it comes back to personally, I think it comes back to people skills. A lot of what we do comes back to people skills. Everyone's out there. A lot of people are focusing on the technical things that are out there and building projects, like you say, Yvonne, food, water, health, whatever it may be, to help the starving. And sure, we do need food, water, and good health to live and survive and be able to
Wow, the internet is really playing with us.
help communities. So I think a lot of it comes by those communication skills back to the community. And I think you touched on a really big one. I think it was you that just touched on it, or it might have been Shay before he jumped off, was all around intimacy and the intimacy we have with ourselves and other human beings. There's a lot of it. A lot of it is we touch on surface layer things, which really doesn't get to the crux of what's going on for us as a human being. So being able to ultimately, share our feelings and then being able to make a difference around that. And I think all that comes back to our communication skills and right back to what you were talking about, Yvonne, around self-esteem and starting with us. So I think you're right on track. There's a lot of fear and hurt out there in the community, and so we need people to heal themselves and get back to feeling good about themselves. And I think you make a really good. I think that's a really good start, because money can change things, but we need to change human beings and help them get back to their basic center and where they're feeling good about themselves. If we have more people feeling good, they can change lots of people's lives around the world. So I like where you're heading with that.
So Shay, how about you? Were you able to tune into what we just said? That the greatest, humanitarian project really is ourselves to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful perspective to have for life. And I really consider myself, and I was thinking about it last night, like asking myself the question, what would I do with myself, if all of my needs in terms of food, shelter, water, and connection was all met, and I didn't have any concern about having to, about money. What would I do with my time? And that would ultimately be it for me. I would love to create art and create music and be creative. And I see life as not just our humanitarian project, but it's our greatest piece of art. We get to create our lifestyle to, to suit what we find joy in doing and what we love to be a part of and what we love to create, and make use of the functions of the tools that are available, whether that be, oil and canvas or a blank field that we could, create this beautiful art piece of a food forest or whatever it may be, that, ultimately ignites and lights up our inner soul. And I totally agree with that perspective of seeing our lives as the greatest humanitarian project of our lives, because ultimately if we because, and I've had this before in my life where I've really wanted to help others, and because I can see that they're maybe needing support without recognizing that also that I need to tend to my own garden, to my cells and myself, and that's the greatest responsibility to be accountable for in our lives. I feel to really look at what is going on in my internal landscape, in my mind garden, and so taking care of that aspect is vitally important, I feel, as well.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Another amazing conversation that we've had. So shall we just have a quick round and some final words, please, Darren?
Sure. I think I think you sort of summarised it in your last little speech. It's all about people at the end of the day. You know, back to making sure that I'm in the best state that I can be to be of service to somebody else. I think you made a really good point there, Shay. And that's part of the receiving part. You know, we can give and give and give all day. I think you just summarised it there. But if we don't attend to ourselves and receive for ourselves, then we are not able to give again the next day. So sometimes we have to take time out in order to receive and look after ourselves, which comes back to the whole summary. We are our own humanitarian to be able to make sure we're at our best in order to be able to give and receive. So I really like both your philosophies there around that. And yeah, so for me, it comes back to that natural law, give and receive, but give first. And then where you need to receive to fill up your own cup. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it there. And, sorry, I'm going to add one more thing. Great question that you had there, Shay. What would you do before your needs were met? But also, once all that's happened, what are we really capable of as human beings and to be able to make a difference in this world? What are we really capable of? I don't think we asked that question enough. It stopped me in my tracks. I was driving in the car and I was listening to this audiobook and I went, no one's ever asked me that question before. What really are we capable of? And we can make a massive difference in this world. We really can. The world will be a different place. Yeah. Over to you.
I love it, Darren. I'm going to leave it with that question because I think it's so potent. What are we truly capable of? And I'm going to sit with that until our next conversation. I think that's a great topic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been another wonderful conversation with wonderful people. And I would like to finish by saying we are doing that. We've got to stop thinking that we still have to do it. We are doing it. We are the people that are doing it, that are making the difference. We are the people we have been waiting for. And I am so excited because I think that we're doing a great job. Even if that's not available on the mainstream media, I can feel it in my heart. So thanks once again. It's been lovely spending time with you. And we'll see you next time for the next conversation. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.